Hi, my name is Liz Thompson, and I'm a professor at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I'm also a member of the EcoSTEM team at Cal State LA. I'm going to be talking to you today about critical participatory action research, and also refer back to the action research video that you also watched. So when we talked about action research, we went through these 6 steps where we had an idea. We thought what would the theory might be that we'd be using. We planned the intervention, doing a complete DOE. We actually did the intervention. We collected data and then analyzed the results. And then we adjusted and repeated, or we implemented and then found the next thing we were going to be doing. One of the things we aspire to in EcoSTEM is that we include the whole community in the things we're doing, and we're also looking for sort of structural changes intervening at the system level. So we actually are aspiring to use critical participatory action research, and the way that differs from action research is in that those impacted or involved in the design are part of the process. And then also we focus on systems changes that are causing the outcomes, not the individuals. And so in this case, this really looks like the type of action research that's called critical participatory action research. And that's where we have participatory of everybody that's involved, and we also are critical analysis of the systems. Now I'm going to go through a couple of principles that we use in action research, in critical participatory action research, and I just want to say that these are our aspirations. We never do all of these, and we are always having conversation about what this means. So I would say that I want to talk about this, but don't be kind of overwhelmed that it seems like how in the world could you do all of this, because this is a process. This is our aspirations. So when we look at these, I have these 7 sort of principles that I would like to talk to you about regarding participatory action research. The first 4 indicate this idea of we have participation of those in the community. So we develop these in conjunction with the people who are impacted. We try to center marginalized voices. We require informed consent so that people who are participating understand what they're doing. We recognize that the researcher, meaning us, is influencing the system and it's not just an observer. And then in the area of critical reflection or analysis, we explicitly address power differentials in the system. We look for structural changes as the goal of this kind of action research, and we work to increase capacity for all involved. So I'm going to go through these one at a time so you have a little bit deeper understanding of maybe what this means in practice. But again, I just want to reiterate that these are aspirations and that we're always trying to talk about this and work towards it. So the first one I'm going to talk about is developing that things are developed in conjunction with the community that it's impacting. So in our case, because we're doing classroom interventions, we would want to have the students as part of the whole action research project. So could we ask the students what might help their engagement? Can we teach about community cultural wealth and get input from them about how that might manifest in their classroom? And then ask students to give examples about how lessons might be more appropriate for them. So doing this in conjunction, and there's some techniques like brainstorming techniques that you can use, but this is the idea that we would not just do this as a expert doing it in the system, but actually the people who are impacted would have input. The next thing we're going to talk about is this idea of centering marginalized voices. So we want to make sure we're creating places for those who are traditionally silenced can speak, where they feel safe to speak. And I'm not sure what that looks like all the time, and we have to keep trying to work with that in mind. We also might track information based on ethnicity and gender, because if there's only very few Latino women in our classrooms, then we might not hear their voices, and we want to make sure we want to understand their experiences. We also might want to meet individually with women or people of color to develop relationships. But we also really need to be cognizant of this idea. We don't want to overburden these folks. They already have to work harder in our systems, and if we actually ask them to do more, that might not be appropriate. The next thing I'm going to talk about is this idea of requires informed consent. And at the basic level, this just means letting the students know that you're going to be trying different things in the classroom and just informing them. And then potentially you could also submit these interventions for approval by the University Institutional Research Board to get approval or get input on the efficacy or the ethics of such interventions. And then maybe even have students sign an informed consent so they understand that you're learning too and that they're participating in this action research process. The next is that you need to recognize the researcher as the influence of the system and not just an observer. And this is particularly true in your own classroom. One of the ways you could really recognize that is you could even just record your own experience in the process. Take notes or journal or do your own reflections of how it felt in the classroom and how the interventions you're doing made you think about different things. Also, it's super important to recognize your own biases, especially confirmation bias. So you might think, oh, this is a really good idea to do this, and then just only collect data that confirms what you already believe. And it's really important to be open to see what the data is telling you, and that's really important. And then also just you should notice your state when, because that can really change the experience for the students. You know that if you've been at a hard faculty meeting and then go to class, you're not in quite the right place to be a forgiving teacher or a generous teacher. But if you just went on a lunch with your friends, then you might be actually more open and relaxed to have conversations with students. And this is true also for the students. Their state impacts the classroom. So if there's a pandemic or if there's some protests going on, or even if there's a death of somebody important to these students, this will all impact everybody's experience. So recognizing that we're all in this together and we influence each other. The next is, now we're going to be moving into things that might be considered critical. So the idea that we explicitly address power differentials. So the way I often do this in the classroom is that I name the power differentials. In that, I have a lot more power in the classroom than the students do. I assign their grades, I tell them when to come and go, I give them assignments. There's a lot of power. And I just would like to have a conversation with them about how that is for them. Is that okay? Do we have to do something else in this space? And then I also often bring up this idea of collective action as a counterbalance to a single person's power. And what I mean is, we all know what this means in the context of like unions, that they can have power the workers can have power if they get together. But this also might be true for students, that if they have power if they get together in a system like higher ed. The next is that we are always looking for structural changes, that these are the goals. We don't just want the things to change in our classroom only. We want it to change throughout the system. So we're thinking ahead to what do these structural changes might look like. Like maybe you want to change the course description, add something in there about community cultural wealth. Maybe you want to change grading procedures that will happen across all the classes you teach. Maybe you want to share what you're doing with the department or college so that people can get ideas and try things in their classrooms. You also might want to create policies at the department or university level. Potentially things like, do you want to have a mid-semester evaluation is a required thing in the college. That could be a policy. And the last thing I want to talk about is this idea of increasing capacity for all those involved. So we often think of students growing, and of course, education is a process for growing people's intellectual ability, but also their ability to have critical inquiry and to be participate in society as a whole. So we all want to be able to do that, and how do we keep that in mind when we're designing educational processes? It also this is a place of increasing our capacity as faculty to have difficult conversations in the classroom about the things like power and structural changes. And then also we want to increase our capacity for sound methods that will actually increase student success. And that's what action research can do, is this is very much a proven method for increasing this. So these are the items that I just talked about related to critical participatory action research, and I hope that was a good beginning to start thinking about what does this mean to not just do action research, but to do critical participatory action research.